The order is already in motion when it first becomes visible. It exists before it is read, before it is acknowledged, before it is understood. It moves as a document moves, duplicated, stamped, transmitted, reduced to reference numbers and time codes. Its language is precise and complete. There is no conditional phrasing, no room for interpretation. Every sentence resolves into action. Every paragraph closes a door. Those who receive it do not ask where it began. That information is neither required nor expected. The order does not request belief. It requires execution. Its authority is implicit, embedded in formatting, in phrasing refined through repetition. This is not an unusual message. It does not arrive marked as urgent or exceptional. It arrives as part of the routine flow, indistinguishable from hundreds of others that have preceded it. It is read aloud in neutral tones. It is transcribed exactly as written. The words are not debated. They are confirmed. Acknowledgement is logged. Time is recorded. Responsibility is transferred downward, cleanly without residue. Each recipient becomes a carrier rather than an interpreter. There is comfort in its clarity. Ambiguity has been removed in advance. Every instruction aligns with established procedure. No step contradicts existing doctrine. No rule is broken. The order fits perfectly within the system that receives it, sliding into place without friction. It does not demand creativity. It does not allow hesitation. It simply requires that what has been defined be completed. Those who pass it along do so with practiced efficiency. They have done this before, countless times, under varying conditions. Their role is not to evaluate but to ensure continuity. The order moves through them, not from them. It is handled carefully, like any object whose value lies in remaining unchanged. As it travels, it gathers momentum. Each repetition reinforces its legitimacy. Each confirmation strengthens its inevitability. The system rewards this movement: speed, accuracy, compliance. There is no mechanism within the process for doubt to attach itself. Doubt would require interruption, and interruption is not authorized. The order reaches operational space already stabilized by consensus. By the time it is prepared for execution, it has passed through enough layers to feel permanent. Its origin is now irrelevant. Its logic is assumed complete. The possibility of error has been eliminated not by analysis, but by acceptance. What follows is not anticipation, but alignment. Timetables adjust. Resources are reassigned. Schedules compress. Everything begins to orient around the order's requirements. The system does not ask whether the order should be carried out. It asks only whether it can be carried out exactly as written. And because it can be, it will be. By the time the final acknowledgement is logged, the outcome is no longer a future event. It is already contained within the order itself, waiting only for time to catch up. The structure that receives the order is not designed to resist it. It is built vertically, layer upon layer, each segment defined by distance rather than discretion. Authority moves downward in measured increments, never skipping, never accelerating beyond what protocol allows. Every level exists to translate intent into function, not to reshape it. The order enters at the top already refined, already insulated from alteration. Each tier performs the same action with minor variations. The order is reviewed for completeness, not correctness. Its alignment is checked against schedules, inventories, readiness states. If it fits, it proceeds. If it does not, adjustments are made around it. The order itself remains intact. The system adapts to preserve the instruction, not to challenge it. Communication flows through established channels that have been tested repeatedly under pressure. Redundancy ensures nothing is lost. Copies are produced. Confirmations are requested and received. Silence is treated as failure, acknowledgement as success. The act of receiving the order becomes proof of its legitimacy. Within this structure, authority is impersonal. It does not belong to individuals. It resides in position, in sequence, in the fact that someone above has already approved what someone below is now required to implement. Responsibility is distributed thinly across the chain, diluted by distance. Each participant controls only a fragment of the process, insufficient to perceive the whole. Training reinforces this fragmentation. Personnel are conditioned to master their segment, not the system. Efficiency is measured by adherence to procedure. Deviation is framed as risk. Questions are framed as delay. The absence of resistance is not enforced through fear, but through habit. Meetings occur. Briefings are conducted. The order is presented as a settled matter. Discussion centers on execution timelines and coordination points. No alternative paths are proposed, because alternatives are outside the scope of the directive. The framework allows only two states, incomplete or complete. The chain of command functions smoothly precisely because it does not require consensus. Agreement is implied by structure. Once the order passes a level, that level becomes complicit in its continuation. To halt it would require authority equal to its origin, and that authority is no longer visible. It has been abstracted away, absorbed into process. As the order descends, it becomes increasingly concrete. What began as language becomes scheduling. Scheduling becomes movement. Movement becomes preparation. Each step narrows the range of possible outcomes. Flexibility diminishes as commitment increases. No alarms are triggered. All indicators remain within acceptable limits. The system reads its own performance as success. Timelines are met. Checklists are completed. The machinery of command continues to operate as designed, converting instruction into action without interruption. By the time the order reaches those tasked with direct execution, it carries the full weight of the structure above it. It is no longer perceived as a decision. It is perceived as a fact. Execution begins without announcement. There is no moment where the order is questioned because there is no moment where questioning is structurally available. What occurs instead is alignment. Units synchronize clocks. Sequences are confirmed. Interfaces connect. Each component activates at its assigned time, according to instructions that have already been rehearsed in abstract. The order is not interpreted, it is enacted. Compliance takes the form of coordination. Movements occur in parallel, not conversation. Signals are exchanged, brief and standardized. Status updates report readiness, not concern. Every response conforms to expected phrasing. Nothing unexpected is registered because the framework has already defined what qualifies as relevant. Those responsible for carrying out the order operate within narrow parameters. Their authority begins and ends with execution accuracy. They do not possess latitude to amend the instruction, nor the context to evaluate it. Their function is to ensure that what was decided elsewhere becomes real, without distortion. The system performs this conversion efficiently. Logistics align with timing. Resources arrive where they are designated to arrive. Paths open, doors unlock. Processes that normally run independently now converge toward a single sequence. The order draws them together, binding disparate actions into a unified movement. There is no urgency in the human sense, no raised voices, no visible tension. The tempo is controlled, regulated by procedure rather than emotion. Even speed is governed by protocol. To move too quickly would introduce error. To move too slowly would constitute failure. Precision occupies the space where judgment might otherwise exist. Checklists are followed. Each item completed reduces uncertainty while simultaneously increasing commitment. With every confirmation, reversal becomes less conceivable. The order is now embedded not only in plans but in action already taken. To stop would require undoing what has already been logged as complete. Communication during execution is minimal. Information flows upward only as confirmation of compliance. There are no requests for clarification. The order was clear. There are no reports of deviation. Deviation has not been authorized. What might be perceived as silence is, in fact, saturation. Every channel is occupied with procedure. There is no space left for reflection. The system has entered a state where movement itself is the priority, where continuation is the default response to any input. As execution progresses, minor irregularities appear at the edges of awareness. They are not interpreted as warnings. They are categorized as variables. anticipated by contingency tables that assume the order remains valid. Adjustments are made locally to preserve overall alignment. The directive remains unchanged. Timing becomes critical, but not fragile. The order has been designed to absorb minor delays and discrepancies. Its rigidity provides resilience. What it cannot absorb is contradiction, and contradiction does not occur. No one issues a countermand. No one requests reevaluation. Those involved focus on their immediate tasks. Each action is small, discrete, controlled. No single step appears consequential in isolation. The magnitude of the operation is distributed across hundreds of such actions, none of which feel decisive on their own. The order continues to execute itself through them. By the time the final phases begin, momentum has replaced intent. The process no longer requires reinforcement from above. It sustains itself through interdependence. To stop now would require multiple simultaneous interruptions, none of which are authorized individually. Execution proceeds as planned. The order is being followed exactly. The first indication of failure does not arrive as an alarm. It appears as a discrepancy small enough to fit within existing tolerance. A delay measured in minutes, not hours. A resource arriving within acceptable parameters, but not optimal ones. Confirmation logged later than expected. None of this violates the order. None of it triggers escalation. The system records the data and continues. The order does not adapt. It was not designed to. Its validity is assumed constant across conditions. When the environment shifts, the structure compensates around the instruction, not within it. Adjustments are made locally to preserve overall compliance. No one considers whether the order itself might be contributing to the misalignment. Information moves upward, filtered through protocol. Reports describe status, not interpretation. Language remains neutral. Terms like deviation or risk are avoided unless thresholds are formally exceeded. The system is calibrated to recognize failure only when it becomes undeniable. As execution progresses, the discrepancies accumulate. Timelines compress further. Margins narrow. Tasks that were meant to occur in sequence begin to overlap. Coordination becomes more complex, but the order remains unchanged. Its authority is not diminished by emerging difficulty. At multiple points, individuals observe that conditions no longer resemble those assumed during planning. These observations remain unspoken. There is no channel for speculative input. The structure accepts only data that confirms execution or indicates non-compliance. Everything else is noise. The order continues to move forward because nothing has occurred that explicitly authorizes stopping it. The absence of permission becomes a mandate. Momentum fills the gap where discretion might otherwise exist. Systems designed for efficiency begin to exhibit strain. Redundancies are consumed. Contingencies activate, not to reassess the directive, but to sustain it. Each corrective action pushes the operation further along the same path, reinforcing commitment, rather than questioning direction. Communication increases in volume but not in substance. More confirmations, more status updates. The flow accelerates as the system attempts to resolve emerging friction through repetition. The order becomes the central reference point, cited repeatedly as justification for continued action. At this stage, the failure is visible in fragments but invisible as a whole. No single participant holds enough perspective to recognize its shape. Responsibility remains distributed. Authority remains abstract. The structure prevents synthesis. The environment begins to resist more actively. Elements outside the system's control behave unpredictably. The order, however, treats these changes as temporary obstacles. It assumes stability will return, because stability was assumed at the moment of issuance. Warnings exist only in retrospect. In the present, there are only metrics approaching limits, never crossing them decisively enough to warrant interruption. The thresholds were set based on conditions that no longer apply, but the thresholds remain. As pressure increases, the cost of stopping grows. Resources are already committed. Actions already taken cannot be reversed without significant disruption. The order now represents not just instruction, but investment. To question it would be to question everything that has been built around it. The system continues to advance. interpreting its own persistence as validation. By the time the failure can be clearly identified, it is no longer preventable. It has already been integrated into the process, unfolding as a direct consequence of doing exactly what was required. The collapse does not arrive suddenly. It unfolds as a convergence of limits reached almost simultaneously. Systems that were designed to compensate begin to fail in coordination rather than isolation. Redundancies, once sufficient, exhaust themselves without notice. What breaks first is not a single component, but the assumption that compensation is still possible. The order remains active. Processes that depended on precise timing lose synchronization. Tasks complete, but no longer in the sequence required to sustain the operation. Outputs arrive where they were instructed to arrive, but at moments when they can no longer be integrated. The system registers completion while effectiveness disappears. Scale becomes visible only through absence. Expected responses do not occur. Expected conditions do not materialize. The structure continues to reference the order as if it still describes reality, even as reality moves beyond its parameters. The instruction has not failed on paper. It has failed in space and time. Attempts to stabilize the situation follow protocol. Additional resources are committed. Secondary procedures activate. These actions are not corrective in nature. They are preservative. They exist to keep the original directive viable for as long as possible. Each intervention increases exposure without altering direction. Loss manifests indirectly, not through dramatic rupture, but through cumulative depletion. Capacity diminishes. Coverage thins. The system stretches itself to maintain coherence, distributing strain evenly until no segment remains unaffected. There is no focal point of disaster, only a widening field of degradation. Communication begins to fragment, not because channels fail, but because reports no longer correspond to outcomes. Confirmations continue to be logged. Actions continue to be executed. The relationship between input and result dissolves. The order still governs behavior, but no longer governs consequence. At this stage, reversal is structurally impossible. Too many processes depend on the assumption that continuation is preferable to interruption. Too many resources have been committed under the same authority. Stopping would require coordinated withdrawal across multiple levels, none of which possess the mandate to initiate it. The system experiences collapse not as an event, but as a condition. Operational coherence gives way to mechanical persistence. Actions are performed because they are required, not because they achieve anything. The order has become detached from purpose, yet remains binding. Its authority is unchanged, even as its relevance disappears. There are no moments of heroism, no decisive interventions, no final stand. What occurs instead is attrition without resistance. Capability drains away quietly. The structure remains intact, but hollowed. When the operation finally ceases, it does so not through command, but through exhaustion. There is nothing left to execute. The order has been fulfilled to the maximum extent possible, even as it has produced the opposite of its intended effect. What remains is not resolution, but aftermath. The system stands, diminished but operational, already preparing to absorb the consequences without altering its foundations. The collapse is complete. The order has been obeyed. Afterward, the order is no longer referenced. It does not appear in summaries or briefings. Its designation is archived, filed among thousands of others that have passed through the same channels. The language that once governed movement and allocation is reduced to metadata. Dates, times, completion markers. Nothing in the record suggests abnormality. The order is marked as executed. The system adjusts without announcement. Schedules are rewritten. Resource tables are recalculated. Losses are accounted for indirectly, absorbed into broader totals that obscure origin. No single document connects consequence to instruction. The structure prefers aggregation to specificity. Detail dissolves into scale. Those who participated return to routine. New directives arrive, formatted in the same language, carrying the same authority. The procedures remain unchanged. Training cycles continue to emphasize precision, adherence, reliability. The failure does not alter doctrine. It is treated as an outcome, not a lesson. Internal reviews occur, but they focus on performance within assigned roles. Compliance is measured. Deviations are noted only where procedure was not followed precisely. The order itself is not evaluated. It does not fall within the scope of review. It was valid when issued. It was followed correctly. That is sufficient. Responsibility disperses further over time. As personnel rotate and assignments change, continuity fragments. Memory becomes institutional rather than personal. The order loses narrative weight. It becomes one of many, indistinguishable in form, detached from consequence. Silence settles where discussion might have occurred, not imposed, but structural. There is no forum designed to question authority retroactively. The system does not revisit decisions unless they violated protocol. This one did not. What remains is infrastructure unchanged by outcome. The same channels, the same hierarchies, the same assumption that obedience ensures stability. The conditions that allowed the failure persist, unexamined, because examining them would require altering the structure itself. Time advances. The order fades into irrelevance, replaced by newer instructions carrying the same certainty. Somewhere else in the system, another directive begins its movement downward, complete and unquestioned. It will be received. It will be acknowledged. It will be executed. And the system will continue, intact, prepared to repeat what it has already absorbed.